got our kicked. And credit 49ers and head coach McVay.
When did you hurt your hand, your finger?
In the second quarter sometime. Just busted the bone through the skin. Nothing bad.
Is that my man? Is that my man Beast? I see you, Beast.
I was available for 3 minutes. They didn't holler at me. I'm good, right? You're good.
By the way, Marshawn ran real well today.
Week 1 of the NFL almost over. What did we learn? Well, I guess that Chuck Pagano didn't know what team had just kicked his you-know-what.
Marshawn Lynch doesn't like media availability.
Shocking. And it doesn't hurt J.J. Watt when a bone sticks out through his finger. Hey, that's Robin. I'm Maggie. Very uneven start to the NFL season, Robin. I'm going to ask you what topped your Week 1 and then what was terrible about Week 1. We are streaming on Facebook Live, so we want to know from you as well. What's your top? What's your terrible? Start with the best.
Top out of Week 1 has to be Odell Beckham Jr., who did as much for his reputation without playing as you can possibly do. In fact, his agent probably should have been on a call with the Giants at halftime last night to renegotiate or negotiate his new deal.
Yeah, he's going to get paid well. My top are the old running backs and the new running backs, both coming through. Marshawn Lynch, 18 carries, 76 yards. The Raiders win on the road. And I love Leonard Fournette, a win on the road, 100 yards, a touchdown on 26 carries. First Jags running back to surpass 100 yards or touch 100 yards in their very first game. What was terrible about the weekend?
How about Scott Tolzien and a brigade of terrible quarterbacks and offenses that had a certain name appear on my timeline a lot, which we'll get to a little bit later, with an honorable mention to the Giants offensive line and the Seahawks offensive line, because those are two Super Bowl contending kind of teams with big holes at super premium spots.
Okay, my terrible for the week is the lack of drama in these games. Peter King has it in his MMQB. You look at the average margins of victory between last season and this season, it was 5 points a season ago. It was 15 points this year, and with offenses averaging less than 100 yards on what they did 1 season ago. You also look at the empty arenas. We got screen grabs. Not everyone's grabbing a beer and going to the bathroom at the same time. Those were some empty arenas. So let's get the thoughts, though, of the all-time leading rusher for the New York Giants. It is Tiki Barber. All right, Tiki, thanks for joining us. We want your top and your terrible for the week.
My top, I'll go back to our Thursday night game. Kareem Hunt was the man. 246 all-purpose yards he had and 3 touchdowns, and none bigger than that 78-yarder, which got them on top 28-27 against the New England Patriots. The interesting thing is the Pats usually come back from situations like that. They had a 3rd and 1. They came up short, went for it on 4th again, didn't get it. That was the last time they crossed the 50-yard line. So to me, it was Kareem Hunt. He made a huge difference for the Chiefs.
Okay, what was your terrible from week 1?
Anything Andy Dalton did yesterday was terrible. I mean, how in the heck do you start the season at home and put a donut on the scoreboard against a division rival? I think the most egregious interception, though, was his second interception that he was trying to force into Brandon LaFell down there tight in the red zone. C.J. Mosley undercut it. He wasn't going to be complete anyways, and takes it back about 25, 30 yards. But Andy Dalton is a guy that we thought was at the point where he was going to start making strides, put this Bengals team on his shoulders, get Marvin Lewis that long-sought playoff victory. It doesn't look like it's going to happen this year.
Andy Dalton, not the only bad performance from a veteran QB, also Carson Palmer, Eli Manning last night. Which of those guys would you say is the closest to being done?
I can't get on Eli. He's my guy, man. They don't run the ball effectively. I'm going to put this on McAdoo. Eli completed 76% of his passes. The problem was his yards per attempt were well under 6, I think at 5.2. And so they weren't able to get the ball downfield. You don't run the ball. The play action pass obviously won't work. But I'd say Carson Palmer. Carson, obviously, we know in the offseason was contemplating retirement. At least that was the story coming out of Arizona. And he was making some mistakes yesterday that you see from younger quarterbacks or those guys that don't have confidence, sailing passes across the middle, being indecisive. David Johnson didn't have quite the day that I think we expected him to have against this Detroit Lions team. At the same time, though, I think we need to give the Lions some credit. Obviously, Matt Stafford signed an enormous deal this offseason, now making $27 million a year, and he started inauspiciously with that interception to begin the game. But after that, he was solid. And defensively, they were solid against a very good Arizona Cardinals offense.
We already touched on it a little bit, but the Giants' offense was terrible. Odell Beckham out. That's one of the obvious reasons that was the case. But is there a bigger problem there?
Well, the bigger problem is always been their offensive line. For the last 4 or 5 years, it's been that because they can't establish a run game. And obviously, we talk about protecting Eli. He's an Iron Man. He's started 200 straight games. Even when he gets destroyed, he gets back up and goes again. But if you don't have a run game in the National Football League, they had 12 carries last night, and you can't do anything well. Right? What the Giants, what Eli particularly does really well is off of the play action. But in order for play action to work, you have to, the linebackers on the other side of the ball have to believe that the ball is actually going to be handed off. We know that's not the case in New York. I think what happens with Odell is he is so good and so dynamic. You throw him a slant, he goes 75 yards. You throw him a hitch route, he jukes someone out and gets you a 40-yard gain. You become dependent upon him. You come to the point where it feels like this offense won't click unless you have somebody that can change the field position. Brandon Marshall was a dud. Sterling Shepard actually had a pretty good day. Evan Ingram didn't get any of the targets, and this offense sputtered. Defensively, I felt bad for the Giants. They were on the field for almost 50 plays and a half. There's like 60, 70 plays in a game. They're 50 and a half. They were just worn out. The Giants have a lot of work to do. I hope they can get it done, but I'm not optimistic after seeing that game on the road against the Cowboys.
Tiki, obviously all of us thinking about the people who are dealing with the after effects of Hurricane Harvey, thought the Texans could give their fans something to feel good about. That was not the case. Tom Savage, anything but. Deshaun Watson comes in, gets a touchdown, although got bailed out by the referees on a call there that led to the touchdown. But should Deshaun Watson now be the starter moving forward?
Of course he should. We said this as soon as he got drafted to Houston, Texas. This is a Bill O'Brien problem that goes back a few years now. He is so indecisive about who he wants at the quarterback position that it leaves your team guessing about who your leader is. There's certain styles that we know there's a style that Tom Savage has. One, he can't throw the ball to the edges. We know that Deshaun Watson has much more escapability, and with an O-line that's struggling, Deshaun Watson was the obvious choice. Now, with that being said, we know they're going to rely on their defense. We know that they have some superstars on that side of the ball. On the offensive side, though, it's going to be a struggle, I think, this year. And it's a shame because we felt like we had high expectations for them. But after what we saw in week one, we could be scratching our head for a few weeks with them.
You know, people might be wondering, geez, why you guys sounded so negative today? Let's get a surprise contender after week one. Who would be your choice?
It's got to be Jacksonville. It's got to be Jacksonville. Look, on paper, Maggie, and I think I told you this last week, on paper, you look at them and you go, all right, star, Pro Bowler. Man, that guy's an all-pro. They get free agents. Calais Campbell has 4 sacks. Miles Jack is leading the NFL in tackles with 14 now. They are studs on defense. Offensively, you say, man, that guy's really good. That's a great receiver, Allen Hurns. That's a great receiver. Yeah, you draft Leonard Fournette. This team looks amazing. The only question mark was the quarterback. What would Blake Bortles do? And I think that their offensive coordinator, Hackett, handled it perfectly yesterday. Throw the ball 21 times, 11 completions. Don't put your quarterback in a position to blow the game. Now, looking at the division, because the Colts are going to stink, I think it's obvious now. I think the Houston Texans, as just was evidenced, and by how bad they lost this game to the Jacksonville Jaguars, are probably on the bottom of the division as well. The Tennessee Titans are the one team to reckon with if you're Jacksonville. Now, you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself, but if you want to pick a surprise team after week one, it's got to be the Jaguars.
Now, you mentioned Leonard Fournette, of course, as part of that analysis. It makes sense. Kareem Hunt was your top performer. It's a really loaded rookie running back class. I mean, we haven't seen Cook yet. McCaffrey got a bunch of touches yesterday. Who will be the top rookie running back?
I think it'll be Christian McCaffrey ultimately. There's just too many ways to use him. The problem is Jonathan Stewart is still a very good player, so some of those touches may get divided for Christian McCaffrey. I'm really excited, though, to see Dalvin Cook tonight and on Monday Night Football. He was such a great player at Florida State, catching the ball out of backfield, running to the edges and through the tackles, and doing whatever you needed to do at that position. And we know how they struggled last year as Minnesota in the run game. So if they can alleviate that at all, those running woes, and give Sam Bradford some time to push the ball downfield, not have to dink and dunk his way to 71% completion percentage again, I think this Minnesota team could be really good, which gives Dalvin Cook a great chance to be very productive because he is the man there.
Tiki, everyone in Arizona holding their breath when they see David Johnson exit the game in the third quarter. 91 yards from scrimmage, not what we're used to, and now dealing with a wrist injury. Most people on the outside would probably look in and say, well, at least it's not his knees, it's not his ankles, it's not his feet. But tell us from your perspective of being a running back, how could a wrist injury affect him?
Yeah, any of those hand injuries are troublesome because you're always using them. I broke my thumb my last season, and I just kept playing with it because that was my last season. But at the end of the day, you get nervous jabbing when you're blocking. You second guess yourself when you're catching the ball. Just simply holding on to the football, going through traffic can sometimes be painful. So it's definitely something to monitor with David Johnson. There were such high expectations for him and this Arizona Cardinals team in general coming into the season. You'd hate to see an injury in week one derail what could have been a huge year for him.
Tiki, appreciate your time. We'll see you again next Monday.
Most certainly. Be good, guys.
Thanks, you too.
Now, as we mentioned off the top, there was a lot of bad quarterback play over the weekend, Maggie, including Scott Tolzien. Does that mean that Colin Kaepernick's going to get signed here? Because to me, it was an illustration of the conversation that we've been having. I mean, just like a factoid. Kaepernick threw 4 interceptions in 331 pass attempts last year. Scott Tolzien threw 2 pick sixes in his first 17 pass attempts yesterday. Not to mention Blake Bortles being out there, Carson Palmer looking done, McCown starting for the Jets. It's sort of just that put into perspective for everybody.
We thought that an injury would be what would bring Colin Kaepernick perhaps to a football team, but maybe it would just be bad play. And I think this is the math that a team has to do, right? A lot of teams said, listen, Colin Kaepernick just doesn't fit our system. He's not like our starter in terms of his style of play, which is why we're not signing him. That was a common excuse that we heard around the league. But my question for them would be, okay, would you rather have a Scott Tolzien, and hate to be picking on this guy, but boy, does he deserve it. Would you rather have Scott Tolzien, who is a poor man's Andrew Luck, rather than a better athlete and a better overall football player who, yes, may not be the exact same style as your team, but at least he could help you win games? And that's what brings me to my next point, which is I'm not so sure how many teams actually have winning as the number one thing this year. You mentioned McCown with the Jets. Winning should not be the priority for the Jets. They're looking for a franchise quarterback. But a team like Indianapolis, they do have their franchise quarterback. Why wouldn't they want someone who could potentially move the football down the field, which Scott Tolzien could not do? So now they have Jacoby Brissett. We'll see if he gets the start next week. He was a third string in the Patriots system, but perhaps he would be an upgrade. I think that's math that a lot of general managers have to start recalculating after seeing just how bad some of their quarterbacks were.
You're talking about pure talent level here, right? It's not about one individual team. And there are some guys, you don't even have to use his name again, there are some guys out there who it doesn't matter the system. Colin Kaepernick is just going to be better in any system than they are.
Okay, another news story from the weekend. On Friday, a district court in Texas granted a preliminary injunction to Ezekiel Elliott, basically saying he can now play for the foreseeable future. Updated this morning, the NFL has filed a appeal to that decision to the Fifth Circuit, which is here in New York. Now, Robin, this is not going to be ending anytime soon. As we saw, when these prolonged court cases happen, it could take months, it could take up to a year, maybe even more of that. And as Peter King wrote in his column this morning, a mantra that Paul Tagliabue, the former commissioner before Goodell, had was, all's well that ends. Not all's well that ends well, all's well that ends. And I think that perhaps the NFL could take a page out of this book, because when I see Ezekiel Elliott saying, I finally get a fair trial, I finally get a chance to prove my innocence, well, that makes me realize that no one has any idea what this is actually about. We've gotten so far away from what the core of this suspension was. And that was Ezekiel Elliott of potentially abusing his former girlfriend. That's not what this trial is about, though. It's about the commissioner's power. And if there's any other reasons to show that this needs to be revamped, the collective bargaining agreement in terms of how discipline is handed out, the personal conduct policy, you have to go back to the drawing board, because these issues are not ending. From the very trite to Deflategate, a very insignificant to the very significant. And if Ezekiel Elliott actually thinks that he's getting a chance to prove his innocence by these court cases, someone needs to send him a message that this has nothing to do with his innocence or guilt.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories the NFL is juggling right now, and most of them are not good. Yeah. And they are staying in the air, right, to extend that metaphor a little bit. That's actually a very good saying about all's well that ends, because we just talked about Kaepernick. That story is not going away until he is on a team. And if this Ezekiel Elliott thing goes to court and plays out over the course of a year, not only are you extending this battle between the players in the league and maybe the animosity that has developed there, but you are, and I hate to use it in this sense, but you're keeping domestic violence attached to the NFL for a prolonged period of time as well. It's very difficult, this particular story, because you don't want to, dismiss what the root cause, why this is happening in the first place. But that has been something the NFL has struggled with. Perhaps some would argue it's why the NFL came out so harshly against Ezekiel Elliott. So as long as this case is being battled publicly, domestic violence and the NFL are going to be associated as well.
So that's what happened week 1 in the NFL. As for college football, well, we saw one quarterback really take aim at an entire fan base. Watch this.
He's not going to plant it in the midfield of the O, is he? Wow. Yes, he is.
It's rare we get Chris Fowler with a, oh, no, he didn't, but he did. Baker Mayfield, of course, sticking the flag of OU into the horseshoe. Pete Mundo is here to react to it. Okay, Oklahoma gets their revenge against Ohio State, 31-16. But Baker Mayfield's move, Pete, was it cool or was it classless?
I thought it was cool because Baker Mayfield for a year has talked about how badly that loss stung last season on his home field. They were singing the fight song in Norman. It crushed him. So he came back, he got his revenge with a really young group of guys, a talented group of guys that people really don't know. And he just felt like he had to do it. He said after the game, it was with the help of some teammates. It was not totally his idea. It was not pre-planned. But I thought it was pretty cool.
It was definitely cool. I mean, come on, we're talking about it. It's fun. Nobody gets hurt. The only people who are upset are Ohio State fans.
Yeah, and apparently they're bad losers. Okay, what does this mean for the Sooners?
Well, the Sooners now puts them in the national title picture. It also puts the Big 12 in the national title picture, which really wasn't the case. They're always viewed as the 5th of the 5 Power 5 conferences. But now, if you're Oklahoma State, you're undefeated in early November. You beat Oklahoma at your home stadium. That's a huge win because this win for Oklahoma over Ohio State, it brings the conference a lot of credibility, which it just didn't have in the last couple of seasons.
Okay, flip side for Ohio State, offense looked very bad. Can it be fixed?
Yeah, got to run the ball more. Mike Weber and J.K. Dobbins averaged over 6 yards per carry the other night. But J.T. Barrett was throwing the ball towards most of the second half, and that was disappointing. You look at those first 2 drives out of the second half, it was 3-3 at halftime. They score on their first 2 drives, touchdown and field goal. They were running the ball 5 times out of 7 plays on that first drive, and then 5 times out of 7 plays on that second drive. Then they go away from the running game, which I could not figure out. The running game was working great. Then they put the ball in J.T. Barrett's hands, and it didn't make any sense.
Does this hurt Ohio State long term?
I think it does because I don't know how good this team actually is. The secondary, which turned over most of it from last season that went to the NFL, those guys didn't look sharp against, say, Sooner skill positions that are not very proven at this point. They're young guys. They were freshmen. They were walk-ons catching touchdown passes. That's pretty unusual. So I'm a little concerned about this Ohio State secondary.
Now, Pete, if I recall correctly, we were sitting in these very chairs at this very table. And you said that Lamar Jackson wouldn't be amongst those invited to New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony, thus wouldn't be repeating as the Heisman winner. Feeling any differently right now?
Well, it's week 2, but yes, a little bit. I'm so impressed with Lamar Jackson. Now, a couple of defenses that no one's going to say is, the 1985 Bears, but still, impressive so far. And I think the biggest thing for me about what Lamar Jackson has done effectively is the end of last season, the book was kind of out on what he was about. This year, he's revamped himself a little bit. He's better downfield with his passes, and that's been very impressive to me with Lamar Jackson. So this guy has got a real test this weekend against Clemson. That defensive line sacked Auburn 11 times last week. So this is going to be the ultimate test. But remember, last year, he tore Clemson up pretty good, so it's going to be fun to see this game.
Another tone change could have come with USC. They were impressive. Are they back to being that team people thought they would be before the season, and Darnold the player?
Yes, they're certainly the class of the Pac-12. I was concerned about the tackle positions and whether or not that was going to really affect this team. But the running game is strong. Darnold got back to what we expected in week 2 against a really good Stanford squad. So it's really around the Pac-12. I don't know who that second best team is right now. So until proven otherwise, what we've seen in 2 weeks and what we thought in the preseason, it's USC. And it's everybody else in that conference.
Let's take away big picture from this weekend. I think the quarterbacks tell the story. Just talking about Darnold, we already talked about Baker Mayfield, Josh Rosen, good again. Who do you think leads it? And also Lamar Jackson. Who do you think is leading the Heisman race right now?
Hate to say it, but it's Lamar Jackson. I mean, the guy comes back as, the reigning champion, and he's had a great couple of weeks. I put Baker Mayfield at number 2. I'd put Rosen at 3 right now, but that to me is the top 3, so I got to hand it to Lamar. He's been great so far.
6 touchdowns is a lot for an individual player.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's reminiscent of early last season. That's how he got into that lead. He had a great start and just kind of held on to the very end, and we'll see if he can do it again.
I wonder if he could somehow seal it with a great game against Clemson, even though it would only be week 3. I don't want to get ahead of myself here with the hot takes.
That would be fun.
It would be fun. Pete Mundo, thanks a lot.
Anytime.
Sloane, I know this is kind of fresh, but having done this once, does it give you a hunger to win another slam, to do this again, feel this feeling again?
Of course, girl. Did you see that check that lady handed me? Like, yes. Man, if that doesn't make you want to play tennis, I don't know what will. Man. So, yes, definitely.
Sloane Stephens channeling Rasheed Wallace. Cut the check, CTC. Congratulations to Sloane on winning her first ever Grand Slam. Stephens, our adrenaline performer. It is presented by Toyota. Let's go places. And what a comeback. The Florida native was ranked 957th as recently as July when she returned to the tour from a foot injury, but she was dominant in the final, needing only 63 minutes to beat fellow American and close friend Madison Keys. The 24-year-old Stephens becomes the first American woman not named Williams to win a Grand Slam singles title since 2002. Of course, she was born the year before Venus Williams turned pro in 1993.
Not bad. Congratulations to Sloane Stephens. Now, you may have thought we've covered everything in this show.
We've covered a lot.
Yeah, actually, there's some
more
things that we haven't gotten to. Some things worth noting, including Aaron Judge, who has joined Babe Ruth, Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, and Lou Gehrig as the only Yankees to hit 40 home runs at age 25 or younger. He's also just the second rookie ever to hit 40, the other being McGuire, and set the major league record for walks for a rookie, 107. Fairly solid debut campaign.
Yeah, apparently a couple days off really helped his shoulder, which may have been injured. Yankees 3.5 games back in the division. Robin, I am calling out your alma mater. Maryland football had a promotion where they offered 10 G's to any student if a football player returned a punt or a kick for a touchdown. Now, the one student not eligible for the money, the student who actually scored the touchdown. Even students who win money hitting a half-court shot have to at least do something. Bad luck from your Terps.
I'm not defending them because I went there. The NCAA in this regard is a joke, right? I mean, players should be fairly compensated.
We don't have to celebrate it.
But this is not celebrating. They're trying to reward a fan who was at the game, and then everybody pointed it out and made him look bad. I mean, what am I going to say? Whatever makes or incentivizes action to make a better program, I'm for it, even if it is at the cost of my school. Tracy McGrady was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame over the weekend. Is T-Mac a Hall of Famer in your eyes?
Yeah, he is. He was on 7 All-NBA teams. So that means 7 times. He was one of the best 15 players in the league, back-to-back scoring titles. I don't always understand the Hall of Fame's choices when it comes to pro basketball, but I understand this one.
You know, Tracy McGrady was an elite wing player, an elite scorer, on par, some would argue, with the Kobe Bryants of that time period. And in fact, I've often wondered how many championships Shaq and, say, T-Mac would have won. Now, Kobe had a better career, let me make that clear, but T-Mac is a worthy Hall of Fame guy. The one question I have with his induction, though, is where's Chris Webber's? Because to me, those two guys are on the same tier.
Maybe we could see it next year. We don't know because the Hall doesn't tell us who votes for the Hall and what the criteria is to get in. Although congratulations, our own Steve Rush and his wife, Rebecca Lobo, obviously one of the great women's basketball players of all time, UConn. She gets in as well, looking good in those orange jackets. That's going to do it for this Monday edition of SI Now. We'll be back tomorrow. There's going to be more NFL storylines that we're going to hit. Fantasy, all of that will be on the docket. But until then, stick with SI.com for all the latest news and headlines. And follow us on Twitter at SI Now Live. That is the place where you can see clips from today's show. See you tomorrow. That was a lot.
It was. I mean, we covered many things.